section of our study, at least the young child portion. I do plan to kind of revisit what it means to be an adult child and how we obey or honor our parents who are adults. How does that transition maybe from when we're younger to when we're older? But I don't want to get into that right now. So, as you recall, after our introduction, we looked at God's ways versus man's ways, hopefully to humble ourselves in terms of being very slow to think about our own experiences and say, well, this is what I believe, and really to prioritize God's teachings on these issues. Then we looked at, essentially the question was, what specific scriptures can we find that speak directly to children's responsibility? So we reviewed a number of scriptures over the last two classes that talked about children's responsibilities. And then one other passage that I wanted to put out that we haven't covered yet, that doesn't speak to children's responsibilities, but just speak about children. Another familiar verse, Psalm 127 and verse 3. Children are a gift from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. Or perhaps a more familiar passage or translation, children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. So again, while not instructions about children, it was something that God says about children. So with those verses, that one and the ones we discussed in our last classes, my next question for us is, how do these verses guide our understanding of children's roles within the family and within society? How do these verses that we studied in the last couple classes and the one that I just read, how do they guide our understanding of children's roles within the family and within society?
I think there's a lot of so even though a lot of the stuff we've read has been about instruction, about obeying, and that's kind of one of the biggest instructions to children. I think it also highlights the importance that they play, or the importance that them learning to obey, how important that is overall, just for, I guess, Christians specifically, but any child, it's super important that they learn these things so that the benefits are going to be immeasurable as they go.
Okay. All right, good. Nathan?
So verses like the one in the Psalms that you just read, and maybe just the overall treatment of children in the Bible impresses me of the value that is placed on children. And so even when we're talking about, verses that talk about how they should obey and things like that, but just the very fact that there's attention played to the child role in the Bible, I think shows us the value of a child.
Yeah.
So the fact that we are supposed to instruct them, they're not just set aside. There's a lot that speaks to them.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Other thoughts? Yeah, I would say the passage that I just read, children are a heritage from the Lord, or children are a gift from the Lord, is one of those passages that gives us God's view of children. They're a blessing. It is a positive thing. Children are a blessing. Period. Children should obey their parents. We've read that consistently throughout. I would say obedient children are much more of a blessing than disobedient children. That's not to say disobedient children aren't a blessing. Hey, that's not included in the Psalm 127:3. But God views children as a blessing, and we should view children that way. God as Nathan pointed out, or maybe it was Cody, children are valued. They have high value, but they also have a responsibility, and that is to obey their parents. So that's part of the process. That's part of their role. And I think it increases, it maximizes their blessing when they obey the parent. If we think back to some of the passages from Proverbs that talk about, an obedient child, what they are like to their parents versus what a disobedient or rebellious child is like to their parents. Completely different experience. And then when we talk about relative to family and society, I mean, let's face it, it's probably unlikely that a child who's rebellious and does not obey their parents is going to be a blessing to society. That's not to say there's not exceptions to that, but again, as a rule, I think we would agree that typically kids that are rebellious within their family are probably going to be challenging to society as well. So again, these are maybe very obvious things, but maybe things that it's good for us to remind ourselves about as we, having completed a study of what does God, what's his view of children, what does he instruct children as we wrap that up. Robin, you had your hand up?
I was just going to say that technically children are blank slates when they're born, and we have to teach them how they're supposed to act, and how they're supposed to be, and how they're supposed to respond to authority. All those things really come from us. Our responsibility to teach them that this is their responsibility.
Yeah.
They don't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's not, they don't come with that implanted, hardwired in, and they have that on their own. A thought just occurred to me, and maybe I'm going to say it, but maybe you all might think of lots of exceptions. I mean, the amount of instruction to parents about children, about how to teach them about children's role to obey, where do we compare that to other things that God has spoken to us? Pets. What does God teach us about pets? Our hobbies. What does God teach us about our hobbies, our career, our profession, our work? There are certainly passages that guide this, but I would venture a guess there's more about children, more about parents' responsibilities to children than there are these other things, and perhaps there's something that we can infer from that in terms of priorities, what God expects us in terms of giving careful attention to things. Is it possible that I give more careful attention to other things in my life than perhaps children? Okay, any other comments, questions? All right, I've been, in our template behind us, I've been saying, one of the things I want to do is talk about, things that perhaps, sayings in society or attitudes in society that perhaps, maybe they influence us. Maybe they're good things, maybe they're not so good. So I want to get to that. One last question, though, before we move into that section of it is, how did we do? Again, this is an adult class full of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. So we're focusing on young children, but having done this study and hopefully having reflected on, how did I do in obeying my parents? These instructions that maybe I read now through the lens of a parent or a grandparent, how did I do? Okay. And this isn't, I have no, I'm only going to respond, react to what, I have no agenda here. I just wanted us to, I didn't want to do all this and then never have any kind of reflection or application. So my guess is when we look backwards, there's always going to be things that we look back on and say, I regret this. I didn't handle this well. I was disobedient, maybe a number of times, maybe some significant times. Maybe we think of times where our relationship with our parent was really, really strained. I'll tell a quick story here just because it involves Greg. Growing up, I was and it doesn't embarrass you at all, so you can relax. It's an embarrassment on me. In my family, we were allowed to have birthday parties every 3 years, which Shannon makes fun of all the time. Like, birthdays are every year. Like, yeah, but we would celebrate our birthday every year, but having kids over, having friends over for a party, that was a once every 3 years sort of thing. I think it was when I was 12. It may have been when I was 15. I can't really remember, but it was usually, 6, 9, 12, 15 was what my memory is. Maybe that's even a little bit off, but this was my last birthday party. And Greg Jones was the only friend that I invited over for my birthday party. It was just a simple, I'm not going for a party. I'm just going to have a friend over. Greg came over for dinner, stayed the night. We probably, I don't know, played some games, watched a movie or something like that. My kids it's a shame that none of my family is here because they would definitely appreciate the family history here. But during dinner, my dad told me to slow down. I was eating too fast. And apparently I didn't slow down enough. And so he made me get up and walk around the interior of our house. There was basically, you could go from the kitchen to the hallway to their bedroom to their bathroom, back to the kitchen, and he made me do 3 laps around the house so I could slow down. I was so mad. I obeyed. This is one of those examples of I obeyed my dad, but I certainly had a horrible attitude about it. I stopped in their bedroom, which obviously they couldn't see me, and I yelled silently, probably something like, I hate you, or I'm so frustrated, like, I can't believe you're doing this. It was it was a very memorable thing. This is my birthday, and why is he doing this to me? Now, we could talk about this. Some of you might be thinking, yeah, that sounds a little bit like exasperating a child, maybe not the best disciplinary measure. Certainly, that's perhaps fodder for discussion when we get into parenting. But as that's one of many times in my life where I remember having a bad attitude about my parents. Many stories that I can think of where, and so maybe my obedience in terms of outward, I did what I was told, but my of respect or honor or submission. As we reflect on our childhood, we probably could also we can say do very well. I did. My guess is if we were to bring our parents into, if all of our parents were sitting next to us, if my mom and dad were here, he was a good kid. He did well. Of course, they don't know about all the times I disobeyed, right? That's one of the things. Overall, they look at it from the passage of time and
their sacrifices, I guess. And now that I have my own children, I see that and then some in them sometimes, and even their friends and their parents. But that's one thing that outside looking in now, you can see that going on.
yeah. Other thoughts? Cody?
I just tough to think about. I guess I'd be careful when I say these right there. But no, I don't have nothing disparaging, but I just remember there being so many times, like you said, maybe looking back at it now, really maybe that was an overreaction on your part, right? How frustrated you got. You think looking back now that was silly to me, And for me, I have that too. There's so many times where things seemed like such a huge deal when I was growing up that I was not able to do something that I wanted to do, and how this was all encompassing, just frustration and not wanting to do what they say. I'm not saying I have an answer, but I guess it's good to reflect on, remembering how big a deal things